From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The message to Mr. Trump very loudly and clearly is we are not going back. We will not accept a president who tries to divide us up by race, by gender, by sexual orientation, by nationality. We are not going back. We have struggled too far. For too many years, too many people have died, gone to jail, and we're not going to retreat back into bigotry in this country.
Today, a Democracy Now! Special. Former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders for the hour. In his first extensive broadcast interview since the election, Sanders talks about Donald Trump, the future of the Democratic Party, the death of Fidel Castro, and Sanders' message to supporters.
Throughout history, serious people have fought back. That's where we are now, and that is exactly what we have to do. It is not acceptable, it really is not, for people to throw their hands up and say, oh, I'm depressed, I'm giving up. It's not about you. It's about the future of this planet. It's about your kids and your grandchildren. It is about American democracy. It is about some very fundamental issues. And nobody in this room or in this country has a right to say, I give up. On the other hand, you've got to jump in and start fighting.
That's Senator Bernie Sanders for the hour. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Today in this holiday special, we spend the hour with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent, self-proclaimed socialist from Vermont, who shocked the political establishment by nearly beating Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary. Since Donald Trump's victory on November 8th, Sanders has emerged as one of the most powerful voices in Washington. He just published a best-selling book titled Our Revolution. I sat down with Bernie Sanders at the Free Library of Philadelphia on November 28th, a few weeks after the election. It was his most extensive broadcast interview since the election. But first, we'll turn to an excerpt of the speech he gave that night.
People are, interested in knowing, well, how did Trump win? How did he win the Electoral College? And I think one of the things that he did was tap into an anxiety and a level of pain that we don't often see on CBS or NBC. And what he said, preposterously, I might add, is that he, of all people, was going to take on the establishment. He was going to take on the economic establishment. He was going to take on the political establishment. He was going to take on the media establishment. And people in a lot of desperation, people who are hurting, responded to that. Now, one of the problems I think we have as a nation, I think media, and by the way, at the back of the book, one of the important chapters, if you get tired, skip to the back. If you don't like taxation or immigration reform, go to the back, last chapter, which deals with, it's entitled Corporate Media, a Threat to Democracy. And it talks about the role of corporate media in our society and in politics in particular. But what is going on in this country is that we live in a pretty siloized nation. That's a kind of a inside the beltway term. I don't know if it's expanded to Pennsylvania. But what it means is we all live in our own worlds, basically. We associate with people who think the same as we do. I guess there was somebody who said, how could Trump have won? Nobody I knew voted for Trump. Well, you don't know people in different walks of life than your own. And one of the things that a lot of middle-class people, upper middle-class people don't know is that, yes, we are better off economically today than we were 8 years ago when Bush left office. There's no debate on that. But for 40 years in this country, under Democratic and Republican administrations, we have seen a shrinking of the American middle class. We have seen more and more income and wealth inequality, so that today the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. And today we have 43 million people living in poverty, some in really dire straits. Now, one of the things that I did in the campaign, what I wanted to do, and I did, was to go into parts of the country where media very rarely goes. And I wanted to be talking to people, and I wanted to see if we can get some national exposure. And in a sense, I failed. We had media following me all over the place, what they call embedded media from all the networks and major newspapers. But basically, they did not write about what we were seeing in various parts of the country. And let me just talk a little bit about that. We talked, and again, these are facts. Some of you know it, some of you don't. But I want you to understand the pain and the hurt that millions of people are experiencing. You're a single mom in Philadelphia. You're making $30,000, $40,000 a year. You have a baby. You need child care in order to get to work. Do you know how much child care costs? You tell me. What does child care cost in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia? $15,000 a year? More? Anyone know? 15? All right. What do you do if you're making $30,000, $40,000 a year and you're paying $15,000 for child care? And that's, I can tell you, in Washington, D.C., I had a young woman working for me. She was paying $32,000 a year for child care in D.C., whereas more expensive there than the rest of the country. Health care. Right? We talk about the gains of the Affordable Care Act, and that's true. It did make some progress. Today, 28 million people still have no health insurance, and many, many others have high deductibles and high co-payments. They cannot afford to go to the doctor when they get sick. You know that? We lose thousands of people every single year, and I talk to doctors all over the country. People walk into their office profoundly sick, and the doctor said, "Why didn't you come in here a year ago when you first developed your symptom?" And they say, "Well, I didn't have any insurance, or I had a high deductible and I couldn't afford it." Some of those people do not make it, or they end up in the hospital at great expense and great suffering. 1 out of 5 Americans today who go to the doctor and get a prescription cannot afford to fill that prescription. 1 out of 5. You got elderly people in Vermont, and I'm sure in Pennsylvania, who are cutting their prescription drug pills in half because they cannot afford to pay for the medicine that they need. What do you think you're feeling when you go to the doctor because you're sick, and you walk into the drugstore and the medicine is so expensive you cannot afford to fill it? You got in Pennsylvania and in Vermont and all over this country, added together millions of seniors, disabled veterans, people with disabilities. They are trying to get by on $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. You can do the arithmetic as well as I can. You're 80 years of age. You are sick. Social Security is your sole source of income, as it is for many people. Try to get by on $12,000 a year. You are an older worker, and I think Trump really capitalized on this one. You are an older worker, 55 or 60 years of age. Half of the older workers in America, do you know how much money they have in the bank as they await retirement? Anyone want to guess? 0. Try to think of yourself at 60 years of age. You're going to retire in 5 years. Everything being equal, you're probably making less in real inflation accounted for dollars than you did 20 or 30 years ago. You're going to retire in 5 years. You got nothing in the bank. How you feeling about the establishment and what the Democratic Party has done for you or the Republican Party has done for you? You are scared to death. And maybe, in fact, you're one of the many millions of workers who actually once had a factory job with a union behind you, and you were making good middle-class wages. You had good benefits. You had a pension. But one day your employer told you that they're shutting down that plant because they could hire people in China for $1 or $2 an hour. And now you're making 50, 60% of what you made when you had that manufacturing job. You could be a college graduate, somebody who saved and scrimped and went to college, left school $50,000, $60,000 in debt, and now you're making $14 an hour. Again, do the arithmetic. You're stuck with that debt year after year after year. You got a debt, but you don't have the income to pay it off. I remember distinctly talking to a guy in Nevada who said that he took out his student loan 25 years ago. He is more in debt today than he was when he took it out. And he's scared to death, literally, that they're going to garnish some of his Social Security in order to pay that student debt. I was in McDowell County in West Virginia, not a widely known area. It's the southern part of West Virginia. But what makes McDowell County unique, what makes parts of Kentucky and that region unique, is they are part of a situation today where millions, this is quite unbelievable, but this is the despair that Trump spoke to. Millions of white working class people are dying today at ages younger than their parents. What modern history has been around, not only in our country but all over the world, is that my generation lives longer than my parents' generation lived longer than their parents. That's been the trend because of improvements in public health, improvements in medicine, cancer, and so forth. We're making some progress. And yet, unbelievably, and this is really unbelievable, millions of people today are living in such despair for whatever reasons, and maybe Amy and I will discuss this, is that they are turning to opiates and heroin. They are turning to alcohol and getting all kinds of diseases associated with alcoholism. And they are turning to suicide, women and men. These are people who, if they're lucky enough to have a job, it's $10 an hour, $11 an hour, they're not going anywhere, their kids are not going anywhere. That is the kind of pain that somebody like a Trump spoke to. I was in Pine Ridge in South Dakota, which is a Native American reservation. The life expectancy in Pine Ridge is equivalent to Guatemala, a poor third world country. Unemployment is rampant, poverty is rampant, youth suicide is rampant in Pine Ridge. I was in Baltimore, Maryland, and I don't know how different it is here in Philadelphia, but in Baltimore, you have tens and tens of thousands of people addicted to heroin. Astronomical numbers. People debate exactly what the number is, and there is no treatment available to them. We took a walk one night, which got the Secret Service a little bit nervous because we were walking in an area that was incredibly desolate, only boarded up buildings. And in nighttime, we were in late afternoon, in the nighttime it becomes a drug bazaar. Everybody knows it. That's where people sell and buying drugs. Tens of thousands of people in Baltimore, and not uniquely Baltimore, dealing with heroin, dealing with opiates, and no treatment available to them. City after city, and I suspect Philadelphia is not an exception, in minority areas, African American areas, Latino areas, youth unemployment, 20, 30, 40%. I was in New York City, took a walk with some people in the city council there. They need $17 billion to rehabilitate public housing in New York City alone. So you got people in public housing living in rat-infested, mold-infested housing in New York. What's the point? The point is there are a lot of people hurting in this country, and their pain doesn't get on CBS or NBC. And some of them mistakenly thought that Trump was talking to them. He talked a whole lot of stuff. We will see what, in fact, he delivers. But the main point is, please do not forget that as we speak today, there are a whole lot of people in this country who are hurting. What media does and what media loves is conflict and political gossip and polls and fundraising and all that stuff. What media loves is to focus on the candidates. What the American people, I believe, want is for us to focus on them, not the candidates. Not anymore. And what this book does is just do that. It deals with what I think, and some of you will agree, some of you may not agree, with what I think are the major issues facing our country: the decline and disappearance of the American middle class, poverty, income and wealth inequality. But it doesn't only lay out the problems, it provides very specific solutions. Question: why are we the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? Why are we the only major country not to have paid family and medical leave? Why do we have a higher rate of childhood poverty than almost any major country on earth? Why are we not dealing more aggressively with climate change? Why do we have more people in jail, disproportionately African American, Latino, Native American, than any other country on earth? China, 4 times our size. We have far more people in jail than China does. We spend $80 billion a year locking people up. Does that make sense? Is there a way out of that? What do we do when we have 11 million people who are undocumented? What does it mean to move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship? In a highly competitive global economy, we once used to have the best educated workforce in the world. 30 years or so, our people in this country graduated and went to college in a higher percentage than any other country on earth. Do you know what? That's not the case anymore. And the gap between those countries who are graduating more people from college than we are is getting wider and wider and wider. What does this portend in terms of the future of our country? So we lay the issues out on the table, discuss the problems, and also provide some real concrete solutions. And that's what I think we have to do as a nation. And in terms of media, there's a chapter that says that maybe it's time for media to start focusing on the real issues facing our country. It was embarrassing. I read this as I wrote the book. Turns out that if you looked at, I think it was the Sunday morning shows, Bernie Sanders alone, and I say this not to boast, but to tell you how pathetic the situation is, 2/3 of the discussion or the mention of poverty took place when I was on those shows. So what does that say about a country when there's almost no discussion of poverty, no discussion, almost no discussion of climate change, very little discussion of income and wealth inequality, no discussion of the role of the corporate media, and I'm glad that Amy is going to be up here in a minute, because what she has done is shown that it is possible, although very difficult, to go outside of the corporate media and develop your own network. But what does corporate media talk about? What do they not talk about? Where do we go forward in media is a very, very important issue.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders speaking November 28th at the Free Library of Philadelphia. When we come back, we sit down for a public interview on the stage at the library. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
Shuffle off the pavement just to let your betters pass? Did you learn to keep your mouth shut? Were you seen and never heard? Did you learn to be obedient and jump to at a word, jump to at a word, jump to at a word?
Did you ever demand any answer?
The who and the what and the reason why.
Did you ever question the setup?
Did you stand aside and let them choose while you took second best? Did you let them skim the cream off and then give to you the rest? Did you settle for the shoddy, and did you think it right to let them rob you right and left and never make a fight? Never make a fight, never make a fight. What did you learn in the morning?
How much did you know in the afternoon?
Were you content in the evening? Did they teach you how to question when you were at the school? Did the factory help you grow? Were you the maker or the tool? Did the place where you were living enrich your life? And then, did you reach some understanding of all your fellow men, all your fellow men, all your fellow men?
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In this holiday special, we're spending the hour with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. I recently interviewed him before a live audience at the Free Library of Philadelphia. The date was November 28th, less than 3 weeks after Donald Trump's defeat of Hillary Clinton. Where were you on election night?
Home.
And talk about what you went through.
Well, when the results came in from Indiana, I was very nervous. We had an outside chance with a conservative Democrat to win that seat. No one thought that Clinton was going to win it. And he got beaten rather badly, and I started getting nervous, and it was downhill from there. I went into the evening thinking that it was about a 2-to-1 shot that Clinton would win. So, I mean, I was not shocked that Trump won. Surprised, but not shocked for some of the reasons that I gave. But I will not deny to you that it was a very depressing evening. I did not want to deal with the media. I was invited to be on a million different things. I didn't even show up at the state event, So I will not deny that it was a depressing evening, and since then I've been thinking as hard as I can with other people about how we go forward and what the best response is.
This also catapults you into the position of the most powerful non-democratic Democrat in the country.
Well, there aren't too many non-democratic Democrats who are in the United States Senate, so it doesn't say much. But yeah, but I think your point is that last week or 2 weeks ago, Chuck Schumer, who is now the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, put me on leadership. And he gave me a position that I wanted, and that is to be chair of the outreach effort. And what I'm going to do is use that position with your help, with all of your help, to transform the Democratic Party. I think it is very easy to beat up on people when they're down, and that's not my intention. Secretary Clinton and her supporters are hurting now. It's not my intention to be beating up on them. But it goes well beyond the presidential race. Right now, in the United States, as you know, Mr. Trump will be inaugurated. Right now, the Republicans control the U.S. Senate. Democrats had hoped, we thought we had a better than even chance of gaining control. We did not. We'll end up with 49 seats. Democrats picked up a few seats in the House, but the Republicans will continue to control the House. Not only that, in about 2/3 of the states in this country, there are Republican governors. And in the last 8 or so years, Democrats have lost some 900 legislative seats in state capitals all over this country. So I think any independent assessment, without casting any blame, says the current approach has failed. All right, when you lose, it's like they always say about the football coach, if you're 0-10, you're not doing well. Well, the current approach clearly is not succeeding, and we need a new approach. And the new approach, I think, is to, A, create a 50-state strategy. That means we start playing ball in states that the Democrats have conceded decades ago. But more importantly, we create a kind of grassroots party where the most important people in the party are not just wealthy campaign contributors, but working people, young people, people in the middle class who are going to come in and going to start telling us what their needs are and give us some ideas as to how we go forward. And I accept this responsibility as outreach chair with a lot of trepidation, but also with excitement. I'm going to be going around the country to try to do everything that I can to create a party which represents working people and not just the 1%.
And the issue of who will head the DNC?
I am strongly supporting a congressman from Minnesota named Keith Ellison. And the reason I've known Keith for a number of years, Keith is the co-chair, along with Raul Grijalva, of the House Progressive Caucus, which is, by definition, the most progressive caucus in the U.S. House. And Keith fundamentally believes, as I've indicated, that we need to make a major transformation of the Democratic Party. We need to make it into a grassroots party, and he has some very specific ideas as to how to do that. So I'm strongly supporting Keith, and I'll do everything I can to.
And the significance of his being the first Muslim Congress member at a time when the president-elect says he wants to set up a Muslim registry?
Obviously, there is great symbolism in that. But to me, to be honest with you, as somebody who's not a great fan of identity politics, I'm supporting Keith because he is a strong progressive whose whole life has been about standing up for working families and the middle class and low-income families. But your point cannot be denied, and that is it will be a statement to the entire country that the leader of the Democratic Party is a Muslim, that we want a party of diversity, that we will not accept for 1 second the bigotry that Trump has been espousing during his campaign.
What do you think Donald Trump represents?
I mean,
and who do you think he represents?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I can give you a definitive answer, but this is what I think. For a start, in terms of the campaign, what he did is, as I indicated in my remarks, he touched the nerve, and it would be wrong to deny that. There are some people who think that everybody who voted for Donald Trump is a racist, a sexist, or a homophobe, or a xenophobe. I don't believe that. Are those people in his camp? Absolutely. But it would be a tragic mistake to believe that everybody who voted for Donald Trump is a deplorable. They're not. These are people who are disgusted, and they are angry at the establishment. And the Democratic Party has not been clear enough, in my view, about telling those people, whether they are whites, whether they are black, Latino, Asian American, or whatever, women, gay, whatever, that we are on their side. And too often what we look at is identity. You're a woman. Well, that's good, but we need more women in the political process. We need more African Americans in the political process, more Latinos, no question about that. But we need people who will have the guts to stand up to the billionaire class and corporate America and fight for working families.
You were considered a fringe candidate. Maybe you yourself considered yourself a fringe candidate. When did the moment come when you actually felt the burn?
I'll tell you. This is what I thought. It's been a crazy 2 years, but what I thought is, look, I wasn't born yesterday, and I wasn't, I didn't just get involved in politics 2 years ago. I've been representing the state of Vermont for 25 years in Congress. I was mayor of the city of Burlington for 8 years, where I took on Democrats and Republicans to win election. And I knew, that the message that we had, I could see it in Vermont. You go to the rural areas, by the way, where people are not necessarily pro-choice, where they may not be enthusiastic about gay marriage, where they may or may not believe that climate change is real, but they are sick and tired of having to work 2 or 3 jobs, not being able to send their kids to college, worried about their own parents. I picked that up, in Vermont. And I thought that the message that resonated in Vermont, and I won my last election in Vermont 4 years ago with 71% of the vote. I did not believe for 1 minute that Vermont was any different than the rest of the country. But what ended up, to answer your question, what happened is, before I decided to run, and the book goes into it, we went around the country. And we did, honestly, politicians always say, well, the people asked me to run, after they'd already made up the decision to run. But the truth is, I didn't know. How responsive would people be to our message? Well, I'll never forget, we were on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in Los Angeles. Maybe the weather is always beautiful there, I don't know. But anyhow, and I thought nobody would show up in a meeting. We had the Musicians Union Hall. Got 500 people coming out. Run, Bernie, run. We were in Minneapolis. This is a funny story, which we relate in the book. We didn't know our way around Minneapolis, so we were driving around. Suddenly we see this long line of people. And I commented to the guy next to me. I said, I wonder what concert is going on. Well, it turns out 7,000 people were there for an event. This is early on. And what we were beginning to see with the turnouts at our rallies, more and more people coming out, more and more excitement, more working people, more young people who indicated to me in a million different ways they were sick and tired of establishment politics and establishment economics. They wanted real change. And I will tell you, as the campaign progressed, that it was an awe-inspiring moment, a humbling moment, to be walking out on a stage, I think it was in Portland, Oregon, where the Trailblazers play in the NBA, and you look out and there are 28,000 people at a rally in Portland, 25,000 in Seattle, 27,000 in Los Angeles. So people were starting to come out, the word was getting around, and it was especially gratifying to see so much beauty in the faces of young people who want real change in this country.
And yet, Who heard you were the people in that room, in each place. You were having the largest rallies of anyone, including Donald Trump, certainly far surpassing Hillary Clinton. But what Donald Trump had that you didn't was the media. And, you know, that was repeated over and over by those that owned the media. You know, he's good for us. So it wasn't just Fox. It was all of the networks that were Trump TV. He didn't have to travel. He was piped into everyone's home. March 15th, Super Tuesday 3, was a night when Rubio gave his speech and Ted Cruz gave his speech. Clinton gave her speech, and Donald Trump, they waited for half an hour for him to give his speech and showed the open podium, as they often did. They showed more of the open podium waiting for Donald Trump than ever playing your speeches. Those were all the candidates that night. And they played all their full speeches. They did not play one word of your speech. You were speaking in Phoenix, Arizona, to the largest rally of any of those people that night. They didn't even speculate where you were.
I wish I could disagree with you. No, Amy is raising a very, and we go into it in the book. I was stunned. I mean, you know, in the middle of the campaign, you're not, you know, figuring out this stuff or thinking about it. Turns out that from January 1st, 2015, I think through November 2015, ABC Evening News had us on for 20 seconds.
What was it you did that was so newsworthy?
And it wasn't much better on NBC or CBS. All right. And that's just the simple truth. And there are a couple of points. I think, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the guy who's head of CNN said, hey, Trump has been fantastic for us. I mean, literally said that. We're making huge profits from Trump. And the point to be made is we had the misfortune of actually trying to talk about the problems facing America and providing real solutions. Trump was tweeting out about how ugly or horrible or disgusting or terrible his opponents were in really ugly terms. Perfect for the media. That is a great 12-second soundbite. But to talk about why the middle class is in decline or why we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality can't be done in 12 seconds. And second of all, it's not something that they are, frankly, terribly interested in.
It was Les Moonves, who was head of CBS, who said it may not be good for America, but it's good for us.
CBS?
CBS.
Yeah, I think a guy in CNN said something similar. Because if you say outrageous things, this is what CNN lives for. That's what they live for. And then they got to have somebody else. Did you hear what he said? Oh, my God, it's terrible. And you go on and on. And that is covered. Here is something. During the primary campaign, somebody, I think it was the Shorenstein School of Media at Harvard, is that where they are? They studied the kind of coverage, and they said that something like 90% of media coverage during the primary, and I don't think it got any better during the general, was all on this kind of stuff, gossip, 10% on issues.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. He's now in the Democratic leadership of the Senate, though he's an independent socialist. We'll return to our conversation with him after a short break.
And I won't breathe the bracing air when I'm gone, and I can't even worry about my cares when I'm gone. Won't be asked to do my share when I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be running from the rain when I'm gone, and I can't even suffer from the pain when I'm gone. Can't say who's to praise and who's to blame when I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. Won't see the golden of the sun when I'm gone, and the evenings and the mornings will be one when I'm gone. Can't be singing louder than the guns while I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. All my days won't be dances of delight when I'm gone, and the sands will be shifting from my side when I'm gone. Can't add my name into the fight while I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. In this Democracy Now! Special, we're spending the hour with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. I interviewed him before a live audience at the Free Library of Philadelphia in late November. I asked him about the standoff at Standing Rock in North Dakota. I asked him about the Dakota Access Pipeline and why he supports the native water protectors who have led the resistance against the $3.8 billion project.
Number one, we're dealing with sovereignty rights for Native American people, an invasion of their own property, and violation of treaty rights, which is an endemic problem in this country. Number two, you're talking about an area where if the pipe burst, water, clean water that goes to millions of people in that region could be severely impacted at a time when we're all concerned about the amount of clean water that we have. And thirdly, and most importantly perhaps, you're talking about whether or not we should be in any way supporting a pipeline which is piping in filthy oil at a time when we need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. So those are the three issues there. I think what we have done is, number one, demanded that the president do what he did with Keystone. A lot of people put a lot of pressure on the president, and he finally did the right thing, and that is to kill the Keystone pipeline, which, by the way, under a Trump may be reopened again. But that is what he should be doing. And certainly the demand must go to the North Dakota authorities that the kind of military presence that exists there is simply not what is acceptable. So we have written to the president. We are going to continue to put pressure on the president to do everything he can to protect the Native Americans in the area and the protesters in the area.
Let me ask you about that famous moment in one of the debates with Hillary Clinton where you said you didn't care about the damn emails. Do you feel the same way today?
What I said, and sometimes it got taken out of context, is that there was an investigation going on, and that I wanted to spend that history 10 years from now. Trust me, no one will remember these damn emails. What they will worry about is people not having health care. They'll worry about climate change. They'll worry about poverty. They'll worry about infrastructure. And my point was, and the media often doesn't play that whole statement, I said, I'm sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails because that's what the whole campaign is about. Why don't we talk about, A, the collapse of the middle class, income and wealth inequality, health care, education, how we move the country forward? And that was the thrust of my point. It is not my style, and sometimes, amazingly enough, I get criticized for it, for running, ugly and negative ads. I prefer to stay on the important issues facing the American people. There are other areas we could have gone as well that Trump went into, that we chose not to do it. Because I think in my own state, I can tell you that people do want to hear a serious discussion on serious issues. That's what we tried to do.
Well, let me tell you the reason I ask this now. This issue that was hijacked by the right-wing media and Trump himself, but the issue of the Secretary of State setting up this private email server, and she has her husband, who's the former president, and running a multi-billion-dollar foundation, meeting with heads of state as well, and yet they don't have accountability here. What this means, not only for them, but if this becomes a model, for example, for President Trump. He runs a vast business empire.
Absolutely.
He is the top government official. If he decides to set up his own private email server and decides that he can disappear tens of thousands of email, there won't be a government record of what is actually going on.
Right. I mean, I think that's a fair point. And I think with Trump, the major point is this guy has business enterprises all over the world. And you're looking just at immense conflict of interest. Every decision that he makes is going to impact his bottom line and some business that he owns all over the world. So it remains a huge issue. And I got your point too, obviously. And that is the valid criticism of having a private email when you're doing government business.
Mm-hmm. And now his cabinet appointments. Your thoughts on the direction he's going in?
Well, I think this is where what our job is. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be, I think, in Indiana on Monday night. And we're going to go to the carrier plant where you have a situation where Carrier is, you'll remember air conditioners, they make furnaces in Indiana actually. And they announced last year they're going to shut down 2 plants in Indiana, throw 2,100 workers out on the street. This is a company that pays top dollar to its CEOs. Head guy makes $14 million. A couple of years ago, they had a severance package for a former CEO. You know what the guy got as a golden parachute? $171 million. And now what they want to do is shut the plants down and move to Mexico and hire people in Monterrey for $3 an hour. So it becomes symbolic of a disastrous trade policy. And we're going to be there. But to answer your question, what we have got to do now, to those people who voted for Trump because they said, well, this guy sounds reasonable. Trump sent out a tweet where he says, I am the only Republican candidate for president who will not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, right? Well, believe me, every American, every person in this country, if I have anything to say about it, will know precisely what is going on with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, because as you've indicated, they are beginning to appoint people who are typical right-wing Republicans who want to privatize or cut Social Security. And our job, and we've got it, we've got every statement that Trump made during this campaign. And we are going to hold him accountable. Every person in this country will know what he said and what he is doing. Trump said, one of the issues that I think a whole lot of people are deeply concerned about is the high cost of medicine in this country. Trump said during the campaign he was going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. He was going to allow for Medicare to negotiate prices with the drug companies, allow people to re-import medicine from Canada and other countries where the price is often half as much as it is in the United States. Well, you know what? We are going to remind the American people of precisely what Donald Trump said about that and many other issues.
So now you have someone like Betsy DeVos chosen to be the new Secretary of Education, sister of Eric Prince, who is founder of the mercenary firm Blackwater.
And a multi-billionaire, a multi-billionaire, I think, very active in politics in Michigan.
And massive supporter of voucher system for education. And then you have Mike Flynn, the National Security Advisor nominee. And this goes to another point of, though it's critical to hold Trump accountable, starting with the Democrats, on the issue of the kill list, President Obama's kill list. His using extrajudicial powers, executive powers, to kill people, can be Americans, without a judge, a jury, without them being charged with a crime. That's President Obama, and he's extending those powers. Your thoughts on President Obama's use of the kill list, and then the idea of President Trump using his kill list?
Well, look, when we talk, obviously I disagree with Obama in using unilaterally deciding who's going to live or die. And look, it goes without saying that, we are concerned, I am deeply concerned about virtually everything that Trump is talking about and has talked about in his campaign and the kind of people that he is appointing. But what's going through my mind right now is to figure out the most effective way that we can fight back. That's really what I am focusing on right now. And what I will say, and what I believe to be the case, the Republicans are many things, but they're not dumb. And if millions of people begin to stand up and fight back, they're going to be thinking twice about doing very bad things. I'll give you just one example, Amy. A couple of years ago, sad to say, not only virtually all Republicans wanted to cut Social Security, there were a number of Democrats who did as well. And some of us in the Senate organizing a Defending Social Security caucus. We work with senior groups all over this country. We got millions of signatures on petitions coming in, and you know what? They backed off. They did not cut Social Security. So I think if there's if there's a lesson to be learned right now, we are fighting for huge stakes. We're fighting for the future of the planet in terms of climate change. We're fighting for the future of American democracy. We have got to mobilize people and rethink our commitment in terms of what our role is in the political process. And the message I just want to make here in Philadelphia and across this country is it is not good enough to say, well, hey, I vote every 2 years, I vote every 4 years. That's fine, but that is not good enough. What we need to do is to be thinking every day the kinds of role we can play in educating and organizing and mobilizing people to defeat this horrific agenda. And I do believe that if millions of people do stand up and fight back, we can stop him from doing some really awful things. And that's what I'm trying to do right now, and we've got to mobilize people to do that.
And I know we just have a few minutes, but this is an historic period. Fidel Castro just died on Friday at the age of 90. During the campaign, Hillary Clinton tried to red bait you by raising your support of the Sandinistas and talking about you being favorable towards Fidel Castro. But I was wondering if you could talk about the significance of the life and legacy of Fidel Castro and talk about the U.S. in relation to Latin America today.
Well, it's not just Latin America. I think what we can say, and I've been to Cuba 2 or 3 times. I think Jane and I went in 1989 for the first time. I've been back a couple of times, and Jane had some educational work in Cuba. A lot of positive things that can be said. Their healthcare system for a third world country is quite good. It's universal. All people have healthcare without any expense. Last time I was there, I visited a hospital where they do very, very serious and good work. They come up with a lot of new drugs, actually, in Cuba, I believe. Their educational system is strong. But in truth, their economy is in pretty bad shape. And in truth, you don't do very well if you dissent in Cuba. So I think, if you look over Castro's long life, he overthrew a terrible dictator, supported by the United States of America, Batista. Some very positive changes came about. We could argue till the cows come home to what degree American interference, created the kind of society that exists in Cuba today. So I think you could say there's some positive things in Cuba, some very negative things. 50 years after the revolution, people still can't dissent with freedom. The economy is terrible. But I think it raises the question. I was on a Sunday show yesterday, and somebody was raising a quote that I made about Castro 30 years ago. It's somehow they've decided that Fidel Castro is that Cuba is the only non-democratic country in the world. Say Saudi Arabia is fine. Many other countries in the Middle East are fine. And what we need to do as a nation is really start educating the American people. You know, Amy, I'm sure, that in 1954, way back when, we overthrew a democratically elected government in Guatemala, was unleashed decades and decades and decades of horror in that country, supported terrible people in El Salvador. We engineered the overthrow of Salvador Allende in Chile. Democratically elected. The first time a person democratically elected in Chile was overthrown through the United States and the CIA. But those issues somehow don't quite make it onto ABC. But I think it is important to understand our role in the world. In Iran, we overthrew, 1954, Mr. Mossadegh?
1953.
53, Mr. Mossadegh. How many people are familiar with that? People know that? Good. Not a lot of people. Certainly young people don't know that. But in 1953, at the bequest of British oil companies, the United States government helped engineer a coup of a guy who was democratically elected, who was thinking about nationalizing some of the oil industry there. He was replaced by the Shah, who turned out to be a very brutal, brutal man, which then resulted in what we have today with Khomeini coming to power. But these are issues that virtually, correct me if I'm wrong, have you seen many shows about that on NBC? It's just not something to be talked about.
Tune into Democracy Now. It's
right.
a good show. Your thoughts that Donald Trump said that he would have won the popular vote, but for the millions of people who voted illegally.
I know this will shock you. I personally do not believe every single thing that Donald Trump says. No, but I did mention in my remarks that was this is, we can go back and look at all of the totally absurd and non-factual statements that Trump made. And I am not a guy in politics who really likes to attack viciously my opponents. It's not my style. But I felt obliged during the campaign to say something that was just patently true, and that is that Trump is a pathological liar. He was saying, and the danger is, it may be, everybody lies. You know you lied. But I fear very much that he may be not even knowing that he lies, that he believes that he saw. The only person in the world who saw in New Jersey Muslims on a rooftop celebrating the destruction of the Twin Towers. The only person in America who saw it. And he's utterly convinced that he saw it. And he may well be convinced of that. It may not be a lie. He may believe that he saw that. But this statement, as I mentioned earlier, the danger of this statement is not just that it is delusional and incorrect, is that it sets, if you have a president who believes that millions of people voted illegally, you're telling every Republican official in this country to suppress the vote, to make it harder for people to vote, whether they are immigrants, whether they are people of color, whether they are poor people, young people, or old people. That is the danger of that statement. And that's something we have got to fight tooth and nail.
Will you be running for president again?
Now you sound... Now, she waited till the end of the program to sound like a mainstream media person.
Well, do I continue to sound that way if I ask you, would you ever consider leaving the Democratic Party that you are actually not a part of?
Well, let me answer the question. 4 years is a long time. I've got to... I'm going to be running for re-election most likely in 2 years from Vermont to the Senate. And there's just an enormous amount of political work that has to be done. At this moment, I think, as now having been recently appointed a member of the Democratic leadership, my job, with the help of everybody in this room, look, we're going to ask a lot from you. And here's the bad news. We don't want just your money. See, and one of the things that bothers me is, and I will take this on, is Democrats spend an enormous amount of time raising money. And I have, for those people who are kind enough to donate, and we appreciate it very much, I got to ask you a favor. Do not take up so much time, and I mean this very seriously, time of the candidates. If I have anything to say about it, they're going to be going to Kansas and Mississippi and Alabama, where they're not going to be raising money. They're going to be talking to working people. So we need financial support, but we don't have the time to spend an evening with 10 people. We need your financial help, but you have to allow serious people in politics to go out and start talking to working people so that we can transform the politics of this country. All right?
Is that a yes for 2020?
So no comment for 2020. It's a statement that, it is a statement that we have to worry, believe me, about 2017 and 2018. And again, let me repeat what I have said throughout the campaign, and I believe absolutely from the bottom of my heart. Politics is not about a person. We transform this country not by electing some guy or woman to be president. We transform this country when millions of people stand up and fight back. That will result in good leadership on top. So the goal right now is not to worry about who's going to be running in 2020 or 2080. The goal now is to mobilize millions of people around the progressive agenda.
And finally, many people are deeply concerned about the two-party duopoly. You yourself are an independent or a socialist. Would you ever consider the third party run, like joining with the Green Party?
You know, I did that. In Vermont, as many know, I defeated Democrats and Republicans to become mayor, defeated Democrats and Republicans to make it into the Congress. Recent years, Democrats have been more sympathetic. And I've been a member of the Democratic caucus for 25 years. So right now, I would not have accepted the position of leadership if I was not serious about fundamentally reforming the Democratic Party. So that's where my head is right now.
Okay. Thank you. Bernie, the last question is,
this is your fourth last question.
For people who are feeling deeply discouraged right now,
yes.
What did you learn from your campaign this time around?
Good question.
Where you almost won.
Let me just say this, and the feeling of this, I wouldn't use the word discouragement, the feeling of maybe frustration, depression, all of which is valid. But here's what I hope that everybody remembers. Anybody who knows anything about American history, you know, think about what this country, and I don't mean to be ultra-patriotic here, but think about the issues that we had to confront. Think about 120 years ago, there were children, kids 12, 10 years old, working in factories, losing their fingers. People fought back. They fought to create unions. Think about the women's movement. Think about the civil rights movement. Think about the gay rights movement. Think about the environmental movement. Think about all of the hurdles that those folks had to overcome. We were, during the course of the campaign, Amy, I don't know if you know this. I didn't know it until last year. We were in Birmingham, Alabama. And all of you, probably remember the horrific bombing that took place in Birmingham. Remember that, where 4 children were killed? I did not know until I was at that church that month in Birmingham, do you know how many bombings there were in that month? Testing you, Amy. I'm asking you a question.
200?
No. But there were a lot. Point being, what's the point? The point is, I thought there was one terrible bombing. There were 13 bombings. That city was under siege by terrorists who did not want to see the Voting Rights Act passed. And people fought back. So where we are now is at a difficult moment. I don't want to minimize the difficulties facing us. But throughout history, serious people have fought back. That's where we are now, and that is exactly what we have to do. It is not acceptable, it really is not, for people to throw their hands up and say, oh, I'm depressed, I'm giving up. It's not about you. It's about the future of this planet. It's about your kids and your grandchildren. It is about American democracy. It is about some very fundamental issues. And nobody in this room or in this country has a right to say, I give up. On the other hand, you got to jump in and start fighting.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders in an interview recorded live on November 28th at the Free Library in Philadelphia. Sanders' new book is called Our Revolution. If you'd like a copy of today's broadcast, you can go to DemocracyNow.org. That does it for today's show. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Dina Guzder, Sam Alcoff, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, Charina Nadura, and Andre Lewis. Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, and Paul Huckabee are our engineers. Special thanks to Becca Staley, Julie Crosby, Anna Ozbeck, Erin Dooley, Miriam Barnard, Hugh Grand, David Prude, Ariel Boone. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.